I am your American English translation specialist for revenge-themed stories. Here is your translation. Sat Nghia. Kong Them Bot. Kong Swong Dong. Tatka Sojuach Viet Bang Chu. Some stories begin with a slap. Some stories begin with a threat. But my story begins at the moment my son-in-law, right in the middle of dinner on the Gallatin River, leaned over to pour wine for everyone at the table except me and said, "After this Tahoe trip, we're going to file the papers to put you in a nursing home. They would take over this cabin." In that moment, I understood that the coldest thing wasn't the Gallatin snow, but the chill from the people who once sat in your own home. If you have ever heard a sentence that made your heart drop a beat, then you'll understand why I have to tell this story. Please leave me a single period and tell me where you're hearing it from. Thank you for giving your time to my story. Your presence is something I always cherish. The afternoon on the Gallatin River had its own kind of light, a soft honey gold glow slipping through the old wood grains of the cabin I had lived in for nearly 40 years. It was the kind of light that made everything look more peaceful than it really was, as if nature itself was trying to hide the bone-deep cold crawling down from the Bridger Range. I stood in the kitchen, my hands slowly laying out the wedding china Eleanor and I received the year we were married, 42 years ago. The gold trim on the porcelain had faded a bit, but each piece still carried that solemn, very Eleanor's feeling. She always loved things that were simple but lasting. Sometimes I fear I've forgotten the sound of her voice, but just placing this set on the table lets me hear her footsteps on the wooden floor again, her soft laugh when I overcooked a roast. I set down the last napkin when the headlights of an SUV flared across the window. 20 minutes late. I drew a deep breath. The door slammed open. "This place is rustic. Are we sure it's livable?" That was the Price family, Lydia's in-laws and her husband. Pauline blurted it out before even stepping inside, her 2 fingers pinching lightly at her coat collar as if afraid the cabin might touch her. Damon walked in behind her, slapping the doorframe like a landlord checking on his property. "Kinda cold, huh? You never re-insulated this place, Dad." Edgar nodded in appraisal, staring at the ceiling like a building inspector. Warmer than I expected," but with a tone that meant bad, but tolerable for one meal. Lydia came in last, my daughter, hair pulled high, expensive white coat. She brushed past me the way someone walks past a carved wooden statue. "What are you cooking, Dad? The smell is a bit strong." She didn't hug me, didn't look at me, just spoke like someone irritated by an inconvenience. I invited them to the table. "A pot roast, your mother's recipe." Lydia didn't answer, just glanced at the china, indifferent. Damon quickly opened the bottle of wine I had set out. It was the kind I chose because Eleanor liked it, not because of the price. He lifted the bottle, looked at the label. "Cabernet under $10, huh, Dad?" Then looked at his parents as if sharing a joke. "He's always ridiculously frugal." Pauline laughed, sharp as a bottle cap popping. "Still keeping your old habits, Harold." Damon poured wine for his wife, for Edgar, for Pauline, and then set the bottle down right in front of himself. Didn't look at me, didn't ask, didn't pour. I kept a soft smile, the kind we Montanans use when we realize we're being belittled but don't want to cause a noisy scene. We began to eat, or more accurately, they began inspecting every inch of the cabin. Pauline lifted the edge of the curtains. "How many years since these were changed? Good Lord." Edgar pointed at the framed photos on the wooden wall. "You should redo the interior. Old houses like this drop in value fast." I am your American English revenge story translation specialist. Here is your Sat Ingia translation, Kong Tem Bat, Kong Zhuang Dong, Tat Kaso Juoch, Viet Bang Chu. Damon flipped open a travel app on his phone and suddenly spoke loudly. "Oh, by the way, we've got good news." I looked up. Lydia turned her body slightly toward her husband, avoiding my eyes. Damon spoke as if giving a speech in a hotel ballroom. We booked the trip to Sapphire Bay Resort, 1 week in Tahoe. 4 tickets. Lydia, my parents, all set. Just 1 heartbeat. I gently set my fork down. And me? A coldness as wide as a whole Montana winter poured into the middle of the table. Lydia didn't look at me. Dad, we need a peaceful week. You make things difficult for us. Pauline nodded, picking up my daughter's words as if they were a simple fact. Bringing someone not familiar with luxury standards to a high-end resort is very inconvenient. I stayed silent. Damon shrugged, leaning slightly toward me, his voice lowered but loud enough for everyone. I'll be straight with you, Dad. After this Tahoe trip, we're filing the papers to put you in Maple Creek Senior Living. That place is way better than this old cabin. We'll manage the house. Lydia didn't object. Pauline smiled as if she'd just heard the most reasonable thing in the world. Edgar nodded in agreement, utterly unaware of the problem with stripping a 68-year-old man of his home. I looked at each face, the way they casually decided my life, the way people might discuss replacing a sofa. In that moment, I heard Eleanor's voice, or the memory of her, speak very softly. Harold, don't let them tear apart the man you used to be. I set my napkin on the table. You all keep eating. I have something to take care of. No one stopped me. No one asked where I was going. They continued talking about ocean view rooms, about the resort's restaurants, about Instagram photos, about a vacation they were confident they'd cut me out of. I climbed the wooden stairs, each step letting out a small sigh. My loft was the same as when Eleanor was alive. The pine dresser, the warm yellow lamp, the black safe tucked beneath the desk. I opened the safe. The light fell across a thick stack of documents. Mercer Holdings financial files, 3 resorts, profit reports, legal papers, total assets over $7 million. I had built my entire life in silence, and they thought I was just a poor old man living in a wooden cabin. I placed my hand on the edge of the documents, feeling the cool paper like a reminder. Silence isn't weakness. It's the knife you keep until the moment you need to draw it. I closed the safe softly and whispered, not for them, but for myself. They want to push me out of my own life. Very well. Night fell over the Gallatin River, slow and thick like an old wool blanket, wrapping the whole cabin in the kind of silence that only early winter Montana knows. I sat at the desk in the loft, with only a single warm yellow lamp spilling light onto the wood surface, forming a small circle of brightness like a private stage for the thoughts I had avoided for years. The laughter, the clinking glasses, the cruel words from the dining room below were still echoing in my head like tiny metal shards slicing at my hearing. But once I closed the loft door, everything quieted, leaving only me and memory. On the wooden shelf directly in front of me was a photo of Eleanor, taken in 2003. Her silver hair softly curled in the sunlight, her bright blue eyes, her hand holding the cabin design we dreamed of finishing before turning 60. In 2001, when I retired from the power company, she and I began planning to build a home that truly belonged to us. Every beam, every floorboard, every saw mark still held the imprint of time and sweat. 4 years, 2001 to 2005, were the best 4 years of my life. On golden autumn days, Eleanor wrapped a scarf around her neck, holding a mug of coffee as she watched me nail each plank. On winter days, we sat by the fire, drawing new layouts for the bedroom, the kitchen, the window placement, so that every morning sunlight could fall exactly onto the shelf she loved. And through all those years, I opened this cabin to both of our children to stay. No paperwork, no contracts, not a single binding line. Just a key placed beneath the flat stone on the porch, like a reminder that this house will always have room for you. I paid the electric bills, the water, fixed the heating system every time the Montana winter sliced through, and re-shingled the roof when storms tore the boards apart. Every expense, from rice sacks to propane tanks, I quietly covered, never asking for a single cent. I always thought family shouldn't need to keep score, but it turns out the very things I never counted are exactly the things they took most for granted. Now the cabin still stands there, steady, warm, but Eleanor is gone, and the daughter we cherished has just declared she wants to lock me in a nursing home, as if I were an object no longer useful. I drew a deep breath and opened my laptop. The screen lit up, pulling me back into another part of my life, one none of them knew, the part Lydia, Damon, and even Pauline believed was empty. The folder Mercer Holdings LLC appeared. 3 large files sat at the top: Jackson Peak Lodge, annual reports, Big Sky Timber Inn, financials, and Sapphire Bay Resort. Acquisition folder. I opened the first file, Jackson Peak Lodge, an investment from 2009, right when the mountain real estate market was collapsing after the 2008 crash. I bought it when the previous owner was exhausted. Walls cracked, roof leaking, bookings down to a trickle. The price back then was not even $600,000. Eleanor had stood beside me on our first scouting trip, touching the old timber and saying, "Harold, this place just needs someone to believe in it." Now, 14 years later, Jackson Peak Lodge generates a steady cash flow of more than $17,000 a month, even higher in peak season, and that is only one part. I moved on to the second file. Big Sky Timber Inn, purchased in 2014, right as Montana became a tourism hotspot. A deal people once laughed at me for, saying I was buying an old wooden lodge in the middle of the woods. But I knew land in Timberline Valley never goes down in value. I bought it for $1.2 million, using savings from selling the wood mill in 2007. Now, Timber Inn alone is valued at over $4.8 million and generates around $23,000 a month. The combined cash flow from those two assets, nearly $40,000 a month, runs steadily into Mercer Holdings LLC accounts, an account known only to me and Attorney O'Donnell. I leaned back in my chair. All these numbers, the lodges, the steady cash flow, the nights I drove 300 miles to sign contracts at midnight. No one in the family knew. No one ever asked. They just looked at me through an old coat, worn boots, a wooden cabin with no large TV, and concluded, "A poor old man. He has nothing. He's a burden." I'd let out a small laugh, not happy, not sad, just the smile of a man who has lived long enough to understand. Nothing is more dangerous than a greedy person thinking you are useless. And that night, when I looked at the numbers on the laptop screen, I knew one thing. They had misjudged this man. Beyond repair. But there was one file that made me pause the longest. Sapphire Bay Resort. I had wanted to buy this resort since 2019, but the previous owner kept the price too high. By 2022, with the impact of the pandemic, revenue plummeted, the bank loan stalled, and the resort fell into a light foreclosure risk category. Meaning, if someone bought quickly, completing the initial payment phase in under 2 weeks, the bank would agree to restructure the remaining loan. It also meant I had an absolute advantage. I pulled my chair closer and opened the email file. The subject line stood out. Sapphire Bay Resort. Immediate sale consideration, price reduced. Sent by Russell Kane, the owner, the content was short, direct, and reeking of desperation. "Harold, if you're still interested, I'm ready to negotiate. The resort is under pressure from the bank. I need a buyer who can move fast, at least an LOI within 72 hours. I leaned back in my chair. 72 hours. 3 days. 3 days to decide the future of myself and the future of the people who had just said they would dump me into a nursing home. I opened another document, Expenses, Lydia and Damon, 2010 to 2022. The final number appeared, $82,400. Tuition, car repairs, rental deposits, credit card debts, wedding funds. Not a single month went by without my help. and in return the sentence, "Dad, you make things difficult for us." I pulled open the drawer and took out the photo of Lydia at 10 years old, standing in the yard, hair messy, holding the wooden horse I made. The little girl who used to run into my arms every time I came home from work. She once said, "Dad, you're the greatest person in the world." I looked at the picture for a long time, then looked back at the foreclosure email. 2 images so painfully opposite. I turned on the note-taking mode on my laptop and wrote a few lines. If signing LOI, need attorney in Nevada plus California. Check county foreclosure regulations. Closing timeline is 5 to 7 days. Maintain 100% confidentiality. Just as I was about to pick up the phone, one thought came to me clearly. There was only one person I could trust with deals this sensitive. The man who had stood with and Eleanor through every major financial decision in our family. I scrolled through my contacts to the familiar name, Martin O'Donnell. He was the attorney who helped me buy Jackson Peak Lodge, the one who handled Eleanor's asset protection documents during her cancer treatment, and the only person I'd ever seen keep files sealed with absolute discretion. A precise man, quiet, never asking a single unnecessary question, and never once disappointing me. I made the call. The other end picked up after 2 rings. "O'Donnell speaking." His voice was low and steady as always. I looked down at the laptop screen, the asset list, the sale email, Lydia's 10-year-old picture, Eleanor's photo on the shelf, all converging into one decision. I said slowly but firmly, "I want to sign an LOI within 72 hours. Set up a closed legal channel." The decision was made. Attorney O'Donnell stated clearly, I must personally fly to Tahoe to close the deal, while all documents, addenda, and filings would be handled by him in Bozeman. All that remained for me was to leave Montana before my resolve had the chance to weaken one more time. The Montana night pulled back behind me like a dense black curtain as the Boeing lifted off the Bozeman runway. The cabin lights dimmed, leaving only the steady engine hum like the heartbeat of a metal beast tearing through the sky. Outside the window, layers of cloud over the Rockies curled upward like frozen waves. I looked down at my palms, trying to stay calm, but Damon's words about the nursing home still echoed inside me. I repeated in my mind, "Not tonight, not like this." When the plane leveled into smooth air, the pilot announced we were passing the edge of the Ruby Mountains, what people call the winter wind gate of Nevada. Moonlight slid across the aircraft, leaving a cold silver streak. I pulled my coat tighter and closed my eyes, trying to push away the thought that in only a few hours I would step into a deal that could realign the entire axis of my life. The early morning flight, only 1.5 hours, felt like a whole decade drifting between passengers' quiet sighs. The plane landed in Reno at 7:42 a.m. I didn't call a cab but rented a Subaru Outback from Hertz, the best snow-climbing vehicle in its price range. The morning road up to Tahoe was cold but clear, and I wanted to reach the resort at 9 o'clock, right when the office staff started. That was where Lydia and Damon were about to enjoy their luxury vacation, and also where I planned to give them a lesson they would never forget. Russell Kane was already waiting in the parking lot when I pulled in with the Subaru. He stood under the awning, tall but slightly hunched, his heavy coat not enough to hide the exhaustion of a man nearing the bottom. He extended a hand, his face a mixture of hope and desperation. "Harold," he said, exhaling a puff of white breath, "thank you for coming this early." Sapphire Bay Resort appeared after a short incline, a cluster of wood and stone buildings, pitched roofs, warm small lights, enough to show its potential, enough to reveal its decline. The main lobby was quiet, with only a few night shift staff around. Vanessa Lee, the resort's general manager, stepped out to greet me. She wore a black wool coat, hair tied back, eyes sharp and alert enough that one might think she'd just walked out of a boardroom rather than a 14-hour shift. "Mr. Mercer, she said, her voice level and firm. "I've been waiting for you." I shook her hand. Her grip was stronger than I expected, the kind of strength found in someone who has kept an entire resort alive during hard years. We began the inspection at 9:15 a.m. and continued past noon. Water and power systems, mechanical room, HVACs, fire code, every emergency exit, every sprinkler valve. Every item was checked properly, nothing for show, and a deal worth more than $2 million. I looked at Vanessa. "How long have you kept this resort running in this condition?" 3 years, she replied, eyes unwavering. "If it weren't for me, it would have shut down last year." "I can see that," I said. After a quick lunch, Russell led me into a small meeting room to review the financial documents. From early afternoon until the honey-colored light outside began to fade, he and I went through every column, every bank liability, every supplier contract. I didn't skip a single comma. When I set the file down, I looked straight at him and said, "I'll buy." Russell's eyes widened. I wrote the number, $2.45 million, and signed the LOI. 10% deposit, $245,000. I called the bank immediately, requesting the transfer the same day so the deposit would take effect at once. Vanessa looked at me, her expression shifting, no longer cold, now carrying a trace of respect. "You move fast," she said. "In my life," I answered, "the only way to survive is not to hesitate." Russell stood, his hands shaking but his voice solid. He looked around the lobby, at the things he had built but could no longer keep, then turned to me. His face, under the uneven yellow lights, held both relief and sorrow. And he said the words I think I will carry for the rest of my life. "You just saved the resort, and you saved me." No one ever told me that silence could become a sharper weapon than any threat. But the next morning in Lake Tahoe, inside the temporary office of Sapphire Bay Resort, as I sat with the 3 people representing Nevada and California law, I understood that this battle would no longer be fought with shouting, but with words, clauses, and signatures worth more than any blow. I set my coffee cup on the oval meeting table, steam still rising from its rim. To my left was Martin Hale, a Nevada real estate attorney. To my right was Cora Mendel, a California hospitality law specialist, the woman O'Donnell introduced barely 1 hour after I emailed him last night. They had read the entire Sapphire Bay file overnight. I looked at them the way a man looks at 2 blacksmiths sharpening his blade. "You want the fastest closing legally possible," Martin said. "Yes." "Then we divide the timeline into 3 layers, Cora said, spreading out a nearly 1-inch thick stack of documents in front of me. "Nevada law, California hospitality compliance, and the most delicate layer, the plan regarding your guests." "My family," I said coldly. Both attorneys exchanged a glance, then nodded. I read the printed timeline. Day 1. Sign LOI plus wire deposit. That's completed. Day 2-3. Title check plus update. Insurance binder. Day 4. Bank confirms asset release from foreclosure. Day 5-6. Closing. All strictly within legal bounds. "And the personnel factor?" I asked. "General manager." Vanessa entered after a soft knock. She sat across from me, back straight, eyes sharp. "I'm ready for your instructions," she said. I aligned the files in front of me. From this point on, Sapphire Bay will belong to Mercer Hospitality, LLC. Cora looked at me. "New company name? I have the draft ready." She passed me the document. Mercer Hospitality, LLC. Single-member ownership. Harold L. Mercer. I signed. Everything officially began there. "Vanessa," I said, "from this moment, you will follow 3 absolute rules." She nodded, serious. "I'm listening." Rule 1. Absolute silence about my identity. "No employee is allowed to reveal that I'm the new owner," I said. "Not a word. Even if they yell at you, even if they threaten you, you remain silent until I appear." Vanessa nodded slowly. "I understand the weight of that. And I agree." "This is the foundation of the entire plan," Cora added. The law does not require an owner to reveal their identity. Guests have no right to know. Completely legal. Rule 2. Reassign rooms within legal boundaries. I said each word clearly, steadily. All rooms booked by Lydia, Damon, and Lydia's parents will be downgraded to standard, exactly within the rights of the resort during an ownership transition. Vanessa opened her tablet. Notification email must be sent 72 hours in advance. U.S. hospitality law. Cora nodded. We drafted the email. Neutral tone, no insult, no liability exposure. Content, ownership transition, room reallocation, updated terms, all valid. I emphasized, no upgrades, no special exceptions, no explanations. Send the email and let them burn on their own. Vanessa gave a slight smile. Cold, but proud. I'll handle it. Rule 3. Price adjustments during transition. Increase service prices by 30%. Restaurant, room service, resort fee, I said. Within 10 days. Martin pushed his glasses up. Entirely legal. A resort in ownership transition may adjust pricing to reflect operating costs. Guests cannot sue unless you target a protected group. You're not, Vanessa said. Understood. I'll re-tag all prices in the PMS by noon. And everything must appear natural, I added. This isn't sabotage, it's business. All three nodded. We spent 3 hours running scenario simulations. If they get angry in the lobby, Marcus will be present. If they demand management, Vanessa will say the standard line. The owner is not on site. If they demand compensation, not covered by policy. If they call the tourism office, no legal violation. Every scenario calculated. Every move of theirs predicted. But revenge wasn't finished, because I still had Montana, the Gallatin cabin they believed they had the right to seize. I opened my laptop and set a meeting with O'Donnell for the next day. I want 2 actions running simultaneously, I said. 1, let them learn their lesson in Tahoe. 2, protect my cabin, so they never step inside it again as managers. Vanessa tilted her head. That cabin is part of the battlefield? It is the root of everything, I said. They want to shove me into a nursing home after their vacation. Then something will be waiting for them when they return. Martin asked, how do you want the cabin protected? Revocable trust? Irrevocable trust? Irrevocable, I answered without a moment's hesitation. Untouchable. Cannot be forced to sell. Cannot be used as an excuse of caring for an aging parent. To take control. Cora lowered her pen. I'll draft it. Outside the glass wall, Tahoe snow began falling heavier, each flake drifting through the lights like shards of glass. I watched them, but I heard every word the attorneys spoke. Once you sign this trust, Cora said, even if they try to force you into Maple Creek Senior Living, they still cannot touch the cabin. Everything locked under Mercer Trust, LLC. That was enough. Enough to know my revenge was built not on impulse, but on law. Not petty, but legal, cold, precise, flawless. I booked the 8:47 p.m. flight from Reno back to Montana. Before boarding, I turned off my phone and put it in my coat, letting Lydia and Damon think I was sulking and needed quiet. To people who see their father as a burden, my silence is never important enough for them to notice. I landed in Bozeman near midnight, drove the rental car through the snow, back to the Gallatin cabin. No one knew I had left Montana. No one knew I was back, and that was the most beautiful part of the plan. As I hung my coat on the hook by the door, my phone buzzed. An Instagram notification. I opened it. Lydia posted a story. 1 week in paradise, without Dad. Her face bright, holding a mimosa on the beach. And in that moment, my plan clicked into a single straight line, sharp as the grain on the cabin's wood. I turned off the phone and whispered into the dark, Good. Let's see what your paradise looks like when I'm the one who built it. The last night in the Gallatin cabin carried a strange kind of silence. Not the silence of snow, not the silence of pine forests, coated in frost, but the silence of threats freshly spoken and not yet dissolved into the air. I stood in the kitchen, the stew pot still warm, the yellow light reflecting off the pine wood that had darkened with the years. Damon stood leaning against the doorway, arms crossed, the posture of a man who believed he already held the upper hand. Lydia sat on the sofa, with legs crossed, and Edgar and Pauline wore sad faces like actors in a third-rate play. In the center of that scene, Damon let out a long, deliberate sigh, the kind meant to make the moment feel heavier, then said something that made the entire cabin colder than the snow falling outside. "Dad, think carefully. Maple Creek has 24/7 care, and this cabin, we'll make the decisions." I set the dish towel down and looked at all four of them. None realized I was looking at them the way one looks at a sloppy performance. Fake worry, fake sympathy, fake morality layered over faces that no longer knew how to blush from shame. "Living alone is dangerous, Dad," Lydia added in a voice forced into softness. "I'm just worried about you." Edgar chimed in. "Maple Creek is very good. They even have private rooms." Pauline nodded. "Because this place," she glanced around the cabin, "is just too sad." All four looked at the cabin like an old item they were preparing to strip from its owner. I looked at Damon. "How long have you planned this?" Damon shrugged. "Whenever you sign. I don't want to force you, but you will force me anyway," I finished. The room froze into silence. Lydia gave a strained smile. "Don't misunderstand, Dad. We only want what's best. What's best for them. Exactly what this cabin was." I nodded slowly. No arguing, no reaction. Not because I was weak, but because inside me had settled still, like Gallatin lake water when it first turns cold enough to freeze. I was done letting them hear me. From here on, only the law would speak for me. I drove down to Bozeman the next morning. The snow was thick, but the road clear enough for my pickup to handle. O'Donnell's office sat beside the Lindley Park, in an old red brick building with bright glass doors, the sort of office belonging to a lawyer who had worked long enough to need no extravagance. He was making coffee when I walked in. "Harold?" O'Donnell looked at me for a second, then nodded. "I'm guessing things got worse." "No," I said. "They got clearer." We sat. I placed the document stack on the table. "I want to proceed immediately." O'Donnell opened each page, unhurried. "Mercer Legacy Trust, irrevocable," he read slowly. "The Gallatin cabin enters the trust. Sole beneficiary, Harold L. Mercer. No one else can request sale, transfer, or mortgage." I nodded. "Not even family can force it." "No," he said firmly. "Irrevocable means even you cannot sell it without the trustee, and the trustee is the person you name. In this case, me." O'Donnell placed another file on the table. "And here's the notice to quit you asked for." A plain sheet, not many words, but heavier than any argument Damon could ever escalate. "None of them are tenants. No lease, no residency rights," O'Donnell said. "If they dare return to the cabin, you simply post the notice to quit. The sheriff will be on your side." I signed every page. No trembling, no hesitation. Signing as if I were signing for my own dignity to keep living. O'Donnell studied me a moment. "Harold," he said softly, "you're not doing this out of anger." "No," I replied, "out of justice. And to protect yourself. Both. Sometimes the law isn't there to punish someone, but to close a door in their face so they understand boundaries exist, and whoever crosses them will meet something colder than any scolding, consequences." When I returned to the cabin, the sky was turning deep purple. Snow layered over the roof, and wind from the Gallatin River hummed low. They were gone, likely checking in for their flight. On the table were the water rings left by Damon's wineglass. I didn't wipe them. I wanted them there, a reminder of where everything began. I went upstairs, opened the safe, and placed all the trust documents inside. From now on, this cabin could not be taken, forced into sale, or transferred by anyone bearing the Mercer name except me. I stood in the bedroom, looking out at the Gallatin, the place where Eleanor and I had stood our first year here. Then I turned, pulled the suitcase from under the bed. Not much inside, a few clothes, the laptop, documents, the knitted coat Eleanor made. I locked the safe, locked the front door, locked the back door. Then I stood at the steps, looking at the cabin one last time before the snow covered my tracks. I pulled the suitcase along the white road stretching outward, and in that silence, only one thought echoed in my mind. If they want to push me out of my life, then I will let them see who their life belongs to. I knew Lydia and Damon's flight was delayed by 2 hours. They booked economy, with a layover in Salt Lake. As for me, after meeting with O'Donnell, a business-class direct flight to Reno had been booked. No lines, no waiting for luggage, no crowds at the gate. While they were still standing at check-in in Bozeman, I was already sitting in a rented SUV, driving along the Nevada mountain roads, straight towards Sapphire Bay Resort. Not because I was rushing, but because justice always arrives on its own schedule. The Sapphire Bay Resort lobby that day was packed in the beautiful kind of chaos, typical of a property about to enter peak season. A group of teens filming TikTok in front of a bougainvillea wall, a wedding party dragging suitcases across the floor, glasses clinking, faint background music from the bar, the smell of sunscreen and pool water still clinging to the hair of guests who had just come from swimming, and the early afternoon sunlight pouring through the glass ceiling, making everything look more magical than it really was. Amid that space, I walked in. Slow, calm, holding a tablet like an employee checking operations. No one knew who I was. No one knew I was the man who had signed the deal that saved this resort from collapse. But Damon recognized me the moment I crossed the green tile line in the middle of the lobby, his face drained of color, as if he'd seen an intruder. "This old man followed us all the way here?" he shouted. People nearby turned their heads. I simply raised an eyebrow at him. No words, no rush, no lowering my gaze, just standing straight, exactly like a man for whom everything was unfolding exactly as planned. Damon marched toward me, jabbing a finger in my face, his voice echoing against the tiles. "Security! Get this old fool out! Kick this old man out of the resort! Now!" A few guests snickered. A TikTok girl turned her camera and whispered, "Oh my God, drama alert, you guys." Pauline grimaced and stepped forward, raising a hand as if I carried some contagion. "He's not family! Remove him!" Her voice loud enough for the entire lounge to hear. Some guests pulled out their phones, an instinct of this era. A young man live streaming said clearly into his mic, "It's getting real messy in here, y'all. Real life family drama." Lydia stood beside them, covering her face, pretending to be embarrassed while sneaking glances at the recording phones. The more attention Damon got, the louder he became. He barked, "Call management! Call security! Throw him out! People like him don't belong here!" Guests began murmuring. A middle-aged man said loudly, "I thought it was some drunk guest, but it's just an old guy. Poor man." I didn't react. I just stood there, tablet loose in my hand, letting the noise of the lobby churn like a storm about to be cut clean, in half, by Vanessa's voice. General Manager Vanessa Lee stepped out from the left hallway, as if she'd been waiting for this moment her entire life. Black coat, gold nameplate, hair tied tight, eyes cold as forged steel. She lifted her hand. She didn't shout, but her voice reached every corner. "Everyone listen!" The lobby volume dropped. Music faded. Phones shifted toward her. Vanessa looked straight at Damon, unblinking. Then she said every word with surgical clarity. "This man is not trespassing." Damon scoffed. "Not trespassing? He followed us from Montana. We told—" But Vanessa raised her hand slightly, slicing his sentence apart. "He is the owner of Sapphire Bay Resort." For 1 second, the entire lobby fell silent, as if someone had muted the world. Then whispers burst across the room like a wave rippling through every cluster of guests. Owner? No way. Wait, that old guy owns the place? Oh my God, they were screaming at the owner. The livestream girl shrieked into her camera. Guys, massive plot twist. The old man they tried to kick out is the owner. Damon went white. His skin looked drained, hollowed out by humiliation. Pauline froze, mouth slightly open, no sound. Edgar stood like a statue. Lydia stepped back, her hand trembling, eyes wide as if I had transformed into someone entirely different. Guests kept filming. Some pointed. Some burst out laughing. Some whispered the sentence I'd heard too many times in airports and hotels. Karma hits fast today. Damon tried to salvage whatever dignity he thought he had. Lies! This is some trick. Who is he? Just some broke old man from Montana. No way he... Vanessa didn't let him finish. Mr. Harold Mercer purchased Sapphire Bay Resort 3 days ago. Contract signed, funds cleared, ownership registered, and all staff were instructed not to disclose this information until he arrived on site. Silence crushed the room again. Then laughter exploded from a group of young guests. Ha, 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 ha. This is gold. They were kicking the owner. An older man from the wedding group shook his head and spoke loudly. I've seen rude kids, but I've never seen anything like this. Damon swallowed hard, eyes reddening, torn between rage and humiliation. He turned, but the crowd boxed him in. Phones raised, lenses trained on him. And then the moment I'd been waiting for arrived. A live stream camera in the far right corner. A phone mounted on a professional gimbal. Crystal clear frame, smooth as water. The operator zoomed straight onto Damon's face. Zoomed until every pore and bead of sweat on his temple was visible. And I knew that moment would spread online faster than any snowstorm that had ever cut across Gallatin. The resort lobby still pulsed with whispers after the reveal. Damon stood frozen in the circle of livestream phones, Lydia tugging at him like pulling a body not yet fallen. Edgar and Pauline backed away, eyes darting, ashamed, humiliated, unsure where to look, but none of them knew that the nightmare they thought had reached the bottom was only the surface of the iceberg, because public humiliation in the lobby was only the prologue. The real damage, sharper, deeper, quieter, would unfold exactly where they felt safest, inside their hotel room. I didn't need to say anything, didn't need to give orders. I simply stepped back into the shadow behind the front desk and let Sapphire Bay's operations handle the rest. Revenge is not always a scream. Sometimes it is silent machinery, moving perfectly within the rules, letting people collapse through every layer by themselves. And just like that, as the Price family dragged their suitcases toward the elevators, furious and humiliated, I knew it was time for them to taste consequence in layers. I no longer needed to appear. A well-run plan is the kind that lets the guilty fall into a net they never knew existed. The next morning, as the first Lake Tahoe sunlight touched the glass panels of Sapphire Bay Resort's lobby, the Price group, Damon, Lydia, Edgar, and Pauline, quietly rolled their suitcases down to the front desk to adjust their booking after last night's chaos. Gone was the excitement of people expecting a luxury vacation. Only tension, fatigue, and the fear of being recognized remained. They didn't know that from the moment Vanessa sent the email, room reassignment due to ownership transition, the entire resort had already begun functioning like a silent machine, placing them exactly where they deserved to be. The lowest floor next to the parking lot, the place where sunlight reached for only a few minutes each morning, and where engine noise became the first sound they heard whenever they opened the curtains. Their room was assigned as room 214, a standard room facing the parking lot. The front desk staff announced politely, voice professional and steady. Damon squinted. There must be a mistake. We booked Ocean Deluxe. The resort is currently in an ownership transition, sir. The receptionist smiled. pointing to the line in their confirmation email. The notice was sent 72 hours prior, as required. And that was that. No one to blame. Damon slammed his suitcase against the floor. Lydia flushed red, but behind them a group of young guests who had just checked in looked very curious. A purple-haired girl asked her friend, purposely loud enough for them to hear, "Oh, you got the budget rooms?" The group burst into laughter. A young man added, "Parking lot view, the premium scent of exhaust." Some older guests even turned back, chuckling, nodding as if to say, "Yeah, that's unlucky." Every word, every stare, every laugh sliced into the Price family's pride. Damon scowled. "Let's go," he growled. But escape was never going to be that easy. They waited for the elevator, and naturally, in a busy resort, when the doors opened, it was already full. Inside were wedding guests, dressed elegantly, laughing in bright voices. When the doors parted, every eye fell on the Price family, then slid down to the room tags in their hands. A man inside raised an eyebrow. "Standard rooms? Oh." A woman murmured, "Budget trip, huh?" The doors closed right in front of them, as if the entire resort had silently agreed to mock them. Lydia clenched her jaw. "Stairs! We're taking the stairs." But the resort stairwell had glass windows facing the parking lot, the exact view they would have to see every single time. Not the blue ocean, not the sapphire lake, only SUVs, diesel engines, and the faint smell of gasoline. When they reached the room, they thought at least the inside would bring some comfort. But the moment Damon tapped the keycard into the lock, the room phone rang. He picked up, "Hello?" A polite female voice answered, "Housekeeping here. Room 214, correct? The room that had noise complaints last night?" Damon froze as if slapped. "What?" The staff continued, still perfectly polite. "Yes, this area had a noise report yesterday, so we're just following up." Damon snapped, voice rising, humiliated. "We just checked in this morning. How could there be noise?" But the staff had already hung up. The exact style of "sorry, I have 40 other rooms to deal with." Pauline stood motionless, face red. Edgar muttered, "We didn't make any noise." It was just a minor misunderstanding, but enough to make them feel the entire resort was whispering about them. And indeed, the resort was whispering. That evening, Damon tried setting up a Zoom call to show off the vacation to his friends. But the Wi-Fi suddenly became inconsistent. Lydia shouted, "It won't load. What kind of Lake Tahoe resort has Wi-Fi this bad?" The front desk pointed to a printed sign beside the elevator. "Network maintenance, in compliance with local city regulations," meaning legal, meaning Damon had to accept that for the next 2 hours the Wi-Fi had just enough strength for messages, not enough for posting bragging stories. "Ridiculous!" Lydia yelled. "A high-end place like this?" But that was only the beginning, because when they decided to go to the pool to relax, they were met with a large sign at the entrance. "Pool closed. 2 hours. Required cleaning cycle." A group of teens walked past, glancing at them while whispering, "Oh, unlucky. Must be because they're in the budget rooms." Another added, "High-tier guests get access to the Lakeview pool instead." Damon clenched his fists. "Fine. Food. We'll order room service." But when they called, the staff replied, "We apologize, but due to temporary staffing shortages, delivery will take longer than usual. Approximately 90 minutes. 90 minutes? Yes, sir. The resort is in ownership transition, so recruitment is underway." Damon slammed the phone on the table. Lydia buried her face in her hands. Why is everything so weird?" Edgar looked around and whispered, "Maybe the resort doesn't like us?" The peak came when Damon opened his laptop to write a complaint. His hands shook with anger. He created an account on a review site and typed with force, "We were targeted," then hit send. But Damon didn't know that 1-star review would become the first spark of attention he never wanted. Evening at Sapphire Bay Resort is usually as beautiful as a postcard. golden lights falling onto the lake surface, soft waves tapping the shore, the smell of pine wood and grilled food drifting from lakefront grill. But that night, for the Price family, Tahoe was no longer paradise. It became a mirror, reflecting all the fakery, vanity, and condescension they had poured onto me for years. When Damon said, "Let's eat out. Room service is terrible," all four of them left the resort, hoping dinner would salvage their disastrous day, but Tahoe did not oblige. A sudden heavy rain fell, not a gentle shower, but the kind of cold rain that slapped into faces before anyone could react. Lydia screamed when water drenched her hair, and Pauline shielded her head with her handbag, running hunched over as if someone were throwing rocks at her. They stumbled onto the lakeside street, rain beating against their clothes, faces, and carry-on bags. A group of young guests sheltering under a bar awning immediately lifted their phones to record. One shouted, "Oh my God, look! Budget room family in the rain!" The group burst into laughter, and the camera panned straight to Pauline. She froze, water streaming from her curls. Then she let out a sentence that had been building all day. "Luxury vacation? My foot." Her voice cracked like a dry pine branch. Edgar beside her tried covering his head with a towel, but water blasted from every direction. He gritted his teeth. "It's worse than a motel." Lydia snapped at Damon. "Why did you book this resort? Where's our Ocean Deluxe? Now the whole internet knows we're in a parking lot room." Damon roared. "It's not my fault." "Whose then? Mine? Or that old man?" Lydia shouted back so loud that restaurant staff nearby turned to look. The fight was no longer a family issue. It became a free show for Tahoe tourists. A couple passing by shook their heads. "If this happened on a honeymoon trip, it'd be a disaster." An older woman said, "Poor father. Must be hard living with them." Those murmurs slipped through the rain, piercing their ears like tiny needles. Each one peeled away another layer of their pride. When they returned to the resort, soaked, cold, furious, Damon rushed to his phone to find a local attorney. He was convinced the room downgrade, the weak Wi-Fi, the pool closure, were all intentional acts targeting them. He opened his laptop and started a video call. A young attorney appeared, wearing headphones, sitting in an office in South Lake Tahoe. Damon unloaded everything. "We were discriminated against. The resort downgraded our room, sabotaged us, let people film us being humiliated. I want to sue." The attorney listened without interruption, then pushed his glasses up and delivered 3 words. "Zero case." Damon stiffened as if slapped. "What did you say?" "There is no legal basis," the lawyer repeated. "The resort can reassign rooms during an ownership transition. Notice was sent 72 hours prior. Everything you described is within operational norms. No discrimination, no violation. But, I advise you not to waste money hiring a lawyer. You will lose outright." Damon ended the call and snapped the laptop shut. Lydia collapsed onto the bed, eyes red with anger, humiliation, and the sense that everything was crumbling beneath her. Pauline slowly peeled the wet scarf from her hair, mascara streaking down her rain-soaked face. Edgar sat swallowed by a small chair, hands clasped, shivering from cold and frustration, but none of that was the worst blow. The real hit came when Lydia opened her phone to check social media. In the lobby, the notifications began. TikTok, Reels, Shorts, newly uploaded videos, all with the same thumbnail. Damon, standing in the center of Sapphire Bay lobby, pointing at my face, screaming, "Get this old fool out!" And immediately afterward, Vanessa in frame. "This man is not trespassing. He is the owner of Sapphire Bay Resort." The clip was trimmed, set to upbeat music with funny captions. "When you scream at an old man, then find out he owns the place." Views, 247,000 in 3 hours. Comments, 4,800, mostly ridicule. Plot twist of the week. This guy's going home in shame. Trying to kick out the owner, Ilmao. Lydia's hands shook so hard she almost dropped the phone. "Damon, It's going viral. Damon snatched the device. Where? His eyes widened. His heartbeat dropped to his shoes. No, no, no way. Pauline held her chest. Everyone is watching. Edgar exhaled shakily. We need to leave this place. But like a storm, a second video, then a third, then a fourth appeared, each from a different angle. TikToker's angle, wedding guest's angle, the right lobby live stream, all forming one unprecedented humiliation stream. And while the Price family curled up inside darkroom 214, my phone buzzed in my coat pocket. A staff member approached, bowed slightly, voice respectful but tinged with disbelief. Mr. Mercer, your clip is going viral. I looked at the screen showing Damon and me facing each other in the lobby, and understood that now not only the resort knew the truth, the whole world knew. Checkout mornings at Sapphire Bay Resort are usually lively, the clatter of rolling suitcases, the smell of coffee drifting from the bar, children running around in bursts of laughter, and that gentle feeling of a vacation about to end. But that morning, as Tahoe sunlight slid across the stone floor like silver leaf, the air around the front desk felt thick with anticipation, not from guests but from staff who had watched last night's video dozens of times. The Price family technically had 3 more days left in their stay, but after the chain of incidents and the public humiliation in the lobby, they quietly packed and decided to leave early. That made the entire front desk pay even more attention, not out of curiosity, but because everyone understood people only leave Tahoe early when their vacation has become something they want to forget as fast as possible. Everyone knew what was about to happen. Everyone knew the Price family would have to walk past the very desk where they had made a scene, called for security, screamed at me as if screaming at a servant, and I, Harold Mercer, stood in a shadowed corner near the lobby bar, where the light was dim enough that they wouldn't spot me right away. I wanted to see their faces when the final part of the lesson landed. Damon walked ahead, dragging his suitcase, face dark, eyes hollow after a sleepless night. Lydia followed, clutching her phone, too afraid to open TikTok in case new clips had appeared. Pauline covered her face with a scarf, mumbling something that sounded like a string of self-pitying complaints. Edgar walked heavily, shoulders slumped, as if he had carried all of Tahoe on his back. They approached the desk. Vanessa was ready. She stood straight, black blazer perfectly pressed, nameplate glinting under the ceiling lights. Her voice was soft, precise, impeccably polite, the kind of politeness that humiliates more effectively than any accusation. "Good morning," Vanessa began. "We've prepared your checkout bill." Damon swallowed. "How much?" "Total charges, $5,300. Damon's eyes bulged. "What? $5,300 for 1.5 nights?" "Sir," Vanessa said evenly, as if reading from a regulation manual, "room charges, resort fee, cleaning fee, tax, and transitional pricing adjustments, all of which were stated in the email." Damon growled. "I'm not paying that." Vanessa gave a small, calm smile, the smile of someone who already knows the outcome. "Sir, if you believe there is an error, we will run your card for verification. This step is mandatory." At the word mandatory, Damon flinched. He glanced at the onlookers, then at Lydia, trying to salvage whatever dignity he had left. He couldn't run. He couldn't collapse in front of everyone. He yanked out his card and tossed it onto the counter, not because he wanted to pay, but because he needed to prove he still could. Vanessa took the card without changing expression. The POS machine beeped and displayed a red message. "Declined." Damon snatched the card back. "The machine's broken." Vanessa remained calm. "Then we'll try again." She inserted the card a second time. Beep. Declined again. Damon's breathing grew ragged. "Try it again." Third attempt. Beep. Declined. And that was the moment the entire lobby held its breath. A group of young guests whispered, "Is that the family from the lobby video?" A woman sipping a latte murmured, "Oh dear, karma is fast today." A married couple exchanged a grin. Last night they tried to kick out the owner. This morning they can't pay the bill. Damon flushed, sweat gathering at his temples. Impossible! My card isn't expired. I have credit. Vanessa responded gently, flawlessly polite. Sir, the card has insufficient funds. That sentence, polite to perfection, cut deeper than any insult. Edgar muttered behind him, Good grief, this is humiliating. Pauline turned away, trembling. Lydia bit her lip so hard it nearly bled. None of them ever imagined they would end up here, watched by an entire lobby like unwilling performers. Vanessa spoke again, this time even softer. Would you like to use another card? Damon stammered. I. But he had no other card. His primary card's limit had been blown on last week's brag shopping spree. And then the moment he feared most happened. Lydia stepped forward, pulled out her wallet, and took out her own card. I'll do it, she said, her voice cracking. Damon snapped at her. What are you doing? This is the resort's fault. That old man's fault. This is... Lydia cut him off. Damon, stop! You've embarrassed me enough. The entire lobby heard it. A group of guests snickered. A man said loudly, Yep, that's definitely the lobby video family. Lydia handed her card to Vanessa. Beep. Approved. Vanessa returned the card with both hands, bowing slightly. Thank you, Mrs. Price. We wish you a pleasant day. The more polite she was, the more it burned Damon's pride. This is your fault, he screamed at her in front of everyone. If you hadn't made that old man angry... Enough, Damon, Lydia shouted, loud enough for the whole lobby to turn. If anyone is at fault, it's you. You yelled at an old man in front of the entire resort. You disrespected people. You made our family a joke. Not me. You. Pauline covered her face. Edgar sighed as if aging 10 years in a breath. A young employee whispered, Poor wife. Damon tried to gather the scraps of dignity he had left. I'm not staying here another minute. He stormed out. Lydia followed, still flushed with humiliation. Pauline and Edgar trailed behind, looking like people who had lost everything. Their image, their pride, their fantasy of belonging to a class they had never actually earned. And as the resort's glass doors opened, letting the cold Tahoe wind slap them one last time, I stepped out from the shadowed corner. No rush, no need to draw attention, just standing there, where the sunlight fell in a sharp angle, my voice low, steady, and clear enough for all four of them to hear before they left the world of luxury they believed they deserved. I stood at the edge of the lobby, voice calm, just loud enough for them to hear, before leaving the life of comfort they thought belonged to them. But to me, the spectacle at Sapphire Bay was only the first half of the play. The other half awaited them in Montana. When the glass doors closed behind Damon and Lydia, I turned, walked into the operations office. Vanessa handed me the final documents. I signed, stamped, and folded them into my briefcase. My work here was done. The truth had been returned to its rightful place. I left Sapphire Bay Resort in silence, carrying the last task still to be completed, a legal gift reserved for 2 children who had never truly grown up. My flight was nearly 6 hours earlier than theirs. I landed in Montana almost half a day before them, enough time to stop by O'Donnell's office and pick up the access rights and notice of termination of access documents prepared in advance. As I drove along the familiar road back toward the Gallatin River, the early winter wind cool against my face, I thought only one thing. If they tried so hard to push me out of my own life, then I would remove them from the thing they believed was their inherited property. When the rental SUV from Yellowstone Airport turned onto the narrow dirt road leading to the cabin by the Gallatin River, the ground was covered in a thin sheet of ice glittering under the early winter moonlight. Damon braked so hard that snow sprayed across the windshield. Pauline lurched forward, squinting through the glass before shrieking in her sharp, grating voice, Wait! Why is the door code panel glowing red? Who changed the code? Lydia's eyes went wide as she stepped out, her hand trembling as she grabbed the pinewood door handle. The very door Eleanor once picked the paint color for. Right in the center, taped firmly, was a white paper, stamped with a bright red seal. Notice of termination of access. Mercer Legacy Trust. Edgar bent down to read it, his brows knitting together so tightly they nearly touched. Access to this property is hereby terminated for non-trustee individuals. Lydia, what does this mean? Pauline shrieked as if someone had poured boiling water over her feet. He has no right to do this. This cabin belongs to my daughter, too. Damon pounded the door, his fists thudding against the wood like someone punching a chest in panic. Open up, Harold. Are you out of your mind? I turned the lock from inside and opened the door. The warm yellow light of the cabin, the light Eleanor always said looked like candle glow, spilled over my face. I stood there, looking at them the way one looks at strangers who have pushed themselves out of one's life. I didn't do anything, I said calmly. I'm simply executing the authority of the trustee. This cabin belongs to Mercer Legacy Trust. You have no right to enter. Cold wind swept in. Snow drifted in thin strands. Lydia seemed frozen, her hand dropping to her side. Pauline stammered, What trust? Who gave you the right? I held up the notarized documents, stamped with the raised seal of Gallatin County. The law gave me the right. You signed papers to put me in Maple Creek Senior Living, and you planned to take my cabin. I simply protected myself. A porch light flicked on at the Holt house, the nearest neighbor, then at the Wakeman house, then the Brett house. One by one, neighbors appeared in their doorways, crossing their arms, leaning on railings, standing behind window glass. No one spoke, no one recorded, but their eyes, sharp, quiet, like a community courtroom, were harsher than any camera. Montana doesn't need live streams to spread a story. Montana only needs witnesses. Damon kept grasping at his crumbling pride, pounding the door again. Open up! We're supposed to manage this cabin! I raised the second document. Civil disturbance warning, Gallatin County Sheriff's Office. I've called the sheriff because you're damaging property and causing disturbance. In Montana, the neighbors hearing the loud pounding is enough for the sheriff to drive over. It's an unspoken rule of these parts. As my words fell, a police siren wailed at the end of the road, blue and red lights flashing across the snow. 2 officers approached. One asked, Who is the legal trustee? I presented the papers. This man, the officer confirmed, then turned to Damon. You need to leave the premises. If you hit that door again, we'll take you in. Pauline choked on her breath, looking around, realizing every neighbor was watching openly, without shame or hesitation. A woman on the porch across the way shook her head and said just loud enough for Pauline to hear, Thought the Tahoe story was exaggerated. Turns out it was all true. The officers signaled one last time, Leave now. The Price family had no choice but to return to the SUV. Damon slammed the door so hard snow slid off the roof. The SUV rolled slowly down the white road. That morning, fog drifted along the ground like thin ribbons of smoke clinging to the base of the Highland Range. I was loading wood into the stove when I heard footsteps crunching across the snow on the cabin porch. Not the loud, defiant steps of Damon, but light, shaky, broken steps, like someone who had walked a long way and no longer had the strength. I opened the door. Lydia stood there. No makeup, no lipstick, hair tied in a rush, eyes swollen and red, like someone who had cried through the night. Her coat was dusted with snow, her hands curled from the cold like a lost child's. Dad! She managed only one word before breaking into tears. I stepped aside, leaving the door open. Lydia walked in, droplets falling from her boots onto the pinewood floor Eleanor used to polish every winter. The cabin was so quiet we could hear her breathing. Dad, I'm sorry. No excuses, no detours, no blame. Those 3 words fell as heavy as stones. I set the wood polishing cloth on the table. Sorry? For what? Lydia inhaled sharply, steadying her voice. For letting Damon lead me? For saying you made us uncomfortable? for taking part in sending you to Maple Creek, for thinking this cabin was something Aki had a right to claim. I looked into the face that used to make Eleanor laugh every time Lydia ran around the yard as a child. Now it was full of cracks carved by dependence and blindness. "Where's Damon?" I asked, though I already knew. Lydia clenched her hands, her lips trembling. "He left, Dad," without a word. No apology, no explanation. He just packed, took the car, and drove out of Montana during the night. I said nothing. Lydia continued. "His family, Pauline, Edgar, all the relatives in Reno, they all blame me. They say I ruined their reputation because of what happened at the resort. They say I'm a burden, someone who dragged their family down. Pauline even said they will never accept me as their daughter-in-law again." Each word scraped its way out of her throat. She looked at me, eyes wet but steady. "I don't have anywhere to go. I don't know what to call home anymore. I need to fix what I've done." I sat on the wooden chair by the stove, feeling the heat spread into my hands. "What are you here to ask for?" Lydia swallowed her tears, voice shaking. "I'm not asking for the cabin. Not for money. Not for you to fix my life for me. I'm only asking for a chance to start over. A chance to return to the place I'm supposed to be." I folded my arms, speaking slowly. "If you want reconciliation, you must accept conditions." Lydia nodded immediately. No resistance. No fear that the terms would be too harsh. "Good," I said. "First condition, you never speak of the cabin again. The cabin belongs to the Mercer Legacy Trust. There is no room for entitlement. I understand. Second condition, you do not claim any of my assets. Not in words, not in hints." "Yes?" I raised my final finger, the hardest one. "Third condition, you cut ties with Damon. No going back, no calls, no explanations, no stepping in to defend him." Lydia burst into tears, but this time it was different. No strangled sobs, no panic. Just the sound of someone finally releasing the rope that had dragged her down a cliff for years. "I agree to everything." I looked toward the window. The base of the Highland Mountains gleamed beneath a sheet of silver snow, a quiet witness to every fall and every rising of a human being. When I was sure Lydia understood fully, I spoke the final sentence. "Honor is not something you bargain for." Lydia nodded slowly, deeply, and in that moment, for the first time in years, I saw in my daughter's eyes something I thought had vanished: gratitude. On a late December morning, I returned to Sapphire Bay Resort in the thin cold of Tahoe's lake country. Dawn mist floated over the lake like a shimmering sheet of silver, the unfinished breath of winter. The distant mountain ranges were washed in blue-gray, and last night's snow rested on the resort's wooden deck like a layer of soft powder. I walked through the lobby, the very place where the unmasking had changed both my life and the Price family's, and heard the fireplace crackle. The scent of burning pinewood mingled with fresh coffee, warming the space the way my Montana cabin used to feel when Eleanor was alive. Vanessa Lee waited for me at the front desk, holding a bound report, her hair in a tight bun, her expression sharp, but her eyes warmer than the day we met. "Good morning, Mr. Mercer," she said, her voice clear and light. I nodded, slipped off my gloves, and stepped closer. Vanessa handed me the bound report. "Revenue is up 28% this month. Reservations for next quarter are nearly full. The viral lobby clip helped position the resort as a property with disciplined, transparent, new ownership." She paused, looking at me with genuine pride. "You should be proud. You saved this place." I turned the pages: growth charts, occupancy rates, satisfaction surveys, travel agency bookings, all brighter than anything Russell had shown me the night I first arrived in Tahoe. But what held me longest was the final photograph. Lake Tahoe at sunset, sunlight pouring across the water in bands of gold. Eleanor used to love light like that. Thank you, Vanessa, I said softly, almost speaking to the mist. This isn't just a resort. It's a chance for everything to begin again. Vanessa smiled. Opportunities only come to those who know timing, Mr. Mercer. You're one of them. I folded the report, slipped it into my bag, and stepped out onto the back deck, the one overlooking the lake. And in that moment, the Tahoe wind carried its mountain-cold scent, mixed with the smell of fresh snow. I placed my hand on the wooden railing, touched the thin crust of ice, and closed my eyes. Eleanor used to say, Harold, real justice doesn't need an audience. It only needs to settle your heart. I didn't fully understand then. I do now. My phone buzzed in my coat pocket. The screen lit up. Lydia, video call. I hesitated a second, then answered. Her face filled the frame. No heavy makeup, no frantic look, no fear. Behind her was a small office with sticky notes on the wall, a schedule board, and a desk cluttered with paperwork. Dad, she smiled softly, I just finished my first training session at the logistics company. They said I did well, really well. I studied her, her posture straighter, her voice steadier, her eyes no longer running from themselves. Good, I said. Work is the beginning of many things. Lydia exhaled, the quiet kind, the exhale of someone stepping out of a long shadow. It'll take time, but I'll stand on my own. I'm not asking for the cabin, not asking for anything from you. The wind carried her voice across the deck like the whisper of Montana's pines. Dad, I just wanted to say thank you. I looked at the sunlit lake and answered, Good, you're on the right path. Just remember what I told you that day? Lydia nodded firmly. I remember. We didn't say much more. We didn't need to. Sometimes reconciliation comes not from long sentences, but from silence both people understand. Before hanging up, Lydia asked, You're in Tahoe, aren't you? I turned the camera toward the lake. She smiled. It's beautiful. Mom would love it. I nodded slowly. Your mother loved any place with golden light. The call ended. I slid the phone back into my coat and stood still for a long moment, watching the first winter flakes drift onto the lake like late-delivered letters. No noise, no spectacle. Just a settling, like when the final winter storm stops howling and leaves behind a clean, silent ground. My justice for Damon, for Pauline, for Edgar, was never about punishing them. It was about protecting me, protecting Eleanor's memory, protecting Lydia from the very shadow she once clung to. I leaned on the railing, watching the snow fall slow and soft, like the mountains exhaling. Justice doesn't shout, I said aloud, as if speaking to myself. It settles, like snow. The Tahoe wind carried my words far down the deck. The lobby's warm golden light spilled across the planks, wrapping my shadow like Eleanor's old embrace. And in that silence, I knew my journey, from Gallatin to Tahoe, had reached its close. Not a loud close, a quiet one, the kind only someone who has endured many long, silent years can recognize. A deserved close, a peaceful justice, one last snow settling, closing the old chapter, and opening a new season, for me, for Lydia, and for Sapphire Bay Resort. If this story made you pause to think about boundaries, about the word family, or the value of silence at the right time, leave a single, so I know you're still here with me, and tell me which city you're listening from. Sometimes just knowing where you stand warms me more than winter snow ever could. If you wish to stay for more stories of quiet justice, of parents pushed out of their own homes, feel free to subscribe and ring the bell. No rush, no pressure. As long as you're still here, I'll keep telling them. Thank you truly for walking with me to the very last line.